How do you build your personal brand so that potential clients will be attracted to you on social media and in your content online? Today I'm speaking to Haase from Clarity Silicon Valley. He's an expert in professional brands and he can tell us exactly how to succeed with our brand. Let's jump straight into the interview. Chris, thank you so much for doing this interview with me here today. Welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here with you, Morris.
My first question is the difference between personal brand and professional brand, because I remember when I reached out to you, I was asking about personal brand and you specifically mentioned to me that you focus on professional brand. So what is the difference there and why is the difference important?
Sure. So it's interesting because personal brand is what everyone uses in terms of how they describe what they think is personal brand. And what I found is that personal brand is actually it's a poorly named turn of phrase. And the reason for that is because when we think about individuals, right, it's different than with companies, right? A company operates in one context. They have a professional context. An individual operates in different contexts, right? We have our family context, our partner, our spouse. We have our hobbies. We have our philanthropic efforts. We have, all kinds of contexts, and we have our professional efforts. And when you look at that context and you add it together, the top value that we deliver in each of those contexts is different. Whereas a company has one context, it's professional, and they only do that. For individuals, we operate in these different contexts. And so therefore, there's no personal context. What does personal mean? Does it mean this mind body? Does it mean my family? Does it mean, it's just not clear. So my view is to be very specific about when it comes to brand, it's professional brand that we're talking about, to make that very clear to the user and to the listener as well. Because part of the brand landscape that I've seen is that we use these terms and phrases that aren't clear, and people use them just willy-nilly. If I say the word shoe to you, you're going to hold a different shoe in mind than what I'm going to hold in mind. And so therefore, we have to be really clear and atomic and specific in my view, so we're on the same page about what we mean and the context within which we mean it.
As a starting point, I wrote down this phrase from you and you said, people spend time on branding, but they don't actually know what their brand is. Can we use that as a starting point for our conversation today?
Let's do it.
What did you mean when you said that? And people spend so much time on branding, but don't know actually what their brand is. What is the difference between these two things?
Well, there's really kind of three different parts of the brand landscape. And if we kind of step back, I can walk you through these pieces here. The first piece of it is branding, right? The second piece of it is brand. And the third piece of it is identity. And they go from the grossest to the most subtle, right? Branding is the grossest and then it goes to the most subtle. And branding, to be clear, is looking at this idea of you're repeating or reinforcing your brand out in the marketplace, right? To people, right? You're getting that out there. And this takes the form of books or a podcast or speaking of some sort or writing blog posts, whatever the case is, where you're reinforcing and you're being visible out there. But part of the thing about branding is you have to know what your brand actually is. So that's why the brand piece is really a starting point for most people, because they haven't done the work to come into a level of integration and alignment for themselves about what it is that is their core story of value. What do they talk about when it comes to their brand? Because if you're going to go out and do branding, okay, but how are you operating from a very aligned place if you don't know what your brand is? So that's how I think about those pieces. And then at the very fundamental level is identity, the sense of a professional me. How do I see that? What's my mindset about where I'm going in terms of what's next in my career? How do I align to those pieces so that I'm in harmony with both the identity level, the brand, and also in the branding as I get out and have that visibility in the marketplace?
I see a lot of people on social media signing up for social media to build their personal brand. It's very often written in their profile description, right? Building my personal brand. And most of the people really struggle. Based on your observation, do you think it's because they're so focused on the branding and they haven't gotten clarity on their brand and that's why they struggle?
So my sense about that is that there's such a focus on the doingness that we have to be doing something to be seen. And there's a truth in that, right? It's true, you have to be visible. People have to see you and hear you and understand that. But if you're not operating from a solid foundation of knowing what your brand is and having done the inner work to kind of clarify what your story of value actually is, then it can be more challenging, because then you're just kind of like doing things here and willy-nilly, and it's not aligned to where you want to be seen or what you want to talk about or what's going to showcase your value in the best light, either on the right channels or with right audiences or even the right content. So you have to clarify those pieces first, because otherwise it's just simply throwing spaghetti against the wall and hoping that someone sees it and goes, oh, I see your value. You're great. I mean, it's not they say hope is not a strategy, and that's an example of where that could be true for certain people in that context.
Oh, that's a great analogy, Chris, because it is true. If we're overcompensating a lack of clarity with massive action, we depend on our audience, or we depend on prospects to find the value in what we do.
That's a well articulated statement, Morris, because it's funny, when I began this work, in the beginning, I used to have my clients ask people in their network, like, tell me, like, how do you see me? And I'd ask them, what do you see as being my core strengths, and trying to figure out this brand thing. And then I realized that the answer is really in here. And they know the answer. They just have to be guided to be able to realize the answer. Because brand, in my view, is a realization game. It's realizing that which you do. It's the most obvious thing in the world in a certain way, but until we turn our attention to it and we can see it with precision, it becomes more. It's a hard thing for people to see, because we're so focused on the external world, on the doing. I have to go do all these things. And again, doing it is valuable and it's important and you should do it. But if you don't have that sense of knowingness about who you are professionally and what your story of value is, that's where things can go a little bit funky. And I would just describe it this way. I want my clients and people that I work with, and people actually just watching this particular podcast, to move from a thought of what they do into the professional beingness of who they are. Because when you make that shift, that's a transformational shift, because you've done the work to kind of step back and look at yourself and go, that's what I do. Because at the end of the day, here's what I want for everyone listening and for people that I work with. I want them to connect to their gifts, the gifts that they inherently need to own to be able to share them with a level of grounded authenticity, if you will, to get out there and share it in the right way with the right people at the right time in the right channels.
Chris, I'm so glad you're here in this interview with me, because I just realized something. People who create content, they want to get clients online. It's usually two camps, right? It's those who struggle with creating in the first place. They struggle to get visible. But then there's this other camp who are taking massive action. They're creating content, they're posting, they're networking, and it just feels like treading water. And now listening to you explain this, I think the problem is that they just haven't figured out their brand the way you're describing it. Yes, they figured out the activity of branding, but the brand piece is missing. Did I understand that correctly?
It could be that's the case. I mean, there's a lot of factors that could be an issue, and I don't want to say this is the thing that this is the hammer and everything else out there's a nail. But what I would say is it's certainly an invitation to inquire into that space and see if a lack of clarity on the brand side is an issue. I'll give you kind of one perspective on this that can be helpful. Part of my work is to help folks move from being an unconscious competent to a conscious competent. When you have a level of awareness about what you do and you see it through a different lens, not with a presumption of value. With my clients, sometimes they go, well, I have this going on, or I have this staff, I have this level of where I'm at in the organization, or I have whatever, or I'm paid this much. There's a presumption of value. But is it true, right? We can look externally for the value and kind of see and go, well, I have this many subscribers, I have this many, that, whatever the case is, this many likes, this many hits. But what actually, that's out there. What's here? And that's really where people have to do the inquiry to see what's true when it comes to these pieces. Because otherwise, it's like it just becomes, we have to look for the external validation versus having the internal knowingness of kind of what shows up and what's really there. So that's where I would say that people have to, as they're at a place to, and if the lack of clarity on brand is causing the issue, and again, there could be a bunch of issues with what you described. I don't know if it's the one issue, but that's one area where I would certainly be curious to explore further with somebody.
When you describe doing the inner work, right, identifying our brand, what it is that we create as a value, Do you believe in, for example, mission statements or writing down our brand?
So the way I think about brand, I mean, at the very simple level, a brand is effectively a value proposition, right? It's a one sentence articulation of value. But to get to that one sentence, that's a distillation, right? You've come through a bunch of things to get to that one sentence. That's not someone just a random, I'm gonna sit down and write a sentence and call it done. It's really taking all these pieces of our professional story and unpacking them and structuring them in a way which actually makes sense so that people can say, hey, you know what? I've done the work to check and I've seen it. So let me give you a framework that can be useful when it comes to this sense of brand. So one of the key things is that there's three parts to brand, right? The first part is going to be, think of a pyramid, and it's going to be about value at the very top, right? What's the one thing that you do for your audience that addresses their top pain? That's the first piece, right? The value piece. The second part is differentiation. And this is a much more nuanced area because there's a lot of things that make us different. And those are the pieces that people tend to sometimes to speak from this level instead of at the value level. And we can get into more of that here if you want to. And then the last level of the pyramid is proof. What's the evidence that you actually can do what you say you do when you talk about value? So that to me is really the where I would operate from when it comes to understanding the brand piece specifically, and to kind of be clear about this and to give you a definition and your listeners a definition of what I see as being brand. It's really about your brand is the conscious realization of your unique distilled story, detailing your strategic value, your differentiated approach, and validated by past aligned proof. And those are the pieces I would say that have to be in place to give you that solid foundation to operate from as you go out and engage with your audience in the marketplace.
So three things you said: value, differentiation, proof, and condensing that into one phrase. That's brand. That's our brand, right? But also when you say that, you just gave an amazing framework for writing our profile descriptions on social media.
There you go. And it's funny because this parallel of this framework of value, differentiation, and proof has a lot of parallels. And I'm glad you picked up on that for social media, because in a certain way, this is how we as humans operate, right? If you think about a cocktail party, we go out and we, if we're engaging with somebody and it's a good connection, the first thing we're going to ask is, what do you do? Right? That's a common question people ask. We're trying to understand what their value is. We're making an assessment of that. The next question is it goes well. And next question, well, how do you do it? We're talking about differentiation. How do you do this thing that you just described to me about that you do? I'm curious. And then the third question that can often follow, if we're even in a good engaged discussion, is, well, where did you do it? Or how did you do it? Where or when did you do it? Which is, give me the past examples of where you did this thing you're talking about. So this is a framework that we use in life, right? Beyond the social media, as you pointed out, but this is also how we operate in life. We're just organically curious. We're searching for that connection of value first. Then we want to know the specifics of how someone does something. And then we want to know the evidence or proof that they actually can do it. So that's a way to think about it, but it can be very useful, right, to articulate this, because it's how we operate as humans at a human level.
Based on everything I've just learned from you, it got me thinking, how can I apply that pyramid to my brand? And I'm going to give it a try here on the spot, and you can tell me how well I did. So for me, it would be like, I help coaches and consultants get clients online by implementing my CreateGrowProfit framework. And I've been helping dozens of business owners, and I run 2 masterminds. Would that be a good application of the pyramid?
So I want to separate 2 things here. So when I mentioned at the beginning that, that your value proposition is a distilled experience of your brand, that is not the only thing that you're going to perhaps say as you introduce, oneself out there. It's it's like the essence of it. In different contexts, when we show up within different environments, we want to use and add on more things to it. So when we take the idea of a value proposition simply, and then we take it on and we get to this framework of value, differentiation, and proof, what I would say is that the value prop is really kind of speaking to this, these first two, right? The value and the high level differentiation that you, for example, in this case, would bring. The proof is going to come after that. If someone goes, "Oh, I want to hear more," you might add more about the differentiation, and then they might ask more, and you might go, "Oh, well then," and then they might be really curious and go, "Well, tell me where you did that," and then you can tell them, "Oh, I did over here, I did over this, with this client, I did with that client." So it's not that you have to put everything of that framework into the value proposition per se, but it's that you're taking the distilled essence, and then and as necessary for the context, you're adding in and layering in the pieces of your story that are relevant and contextual to the discussion that you're having with the audience that is present.
Oh, thank you so much for explaining that, Chris. That makes a lot of sense now. Yeah, because it did feel like trying to cram too much into one phrase.
And by the way, just to say, what you're sharing with your value proposition that you gave a stab at, first of all, kudos to you for doing that. The pieces of the puzzle, I would say that you have some of the pieces there, and I think there are ways to optimize them even further. And I think that but you're on the right track is what I would say. You're talking about the audience, you're talking about some deliverable or some promise of delivery, the value that you're talking about, and you're also describing a bit of the how that you actually do that. So I can see you're on the right track with what you're going forward on that.
And I will add that anyone who is struggling with this needs to reach out to you, Chris. Where do they reach out to you to create their brand?
So my website is claritysiliconvalley.com. They can find me there and connect. And also I'm happy to share a bonus gift for people who want to go a bit deeper in this. And I'll add a link to where they can download that here with you as well. So I'm happy to here's the bottom line. At the end of the day, I want to help people get their brands clear, because there's a real value in realizing what it is that we do in a different way, right? One thing I'll just share about this too, Morris, is that think of there's a framework that a friend of mine actually came up with that I really like, which is there's conceptual, there's actualized, and then there is realized. Conceptualized is simply a matter of you're in your head, right? You're up here, or you can have a concept of anything. Actualized is where you've had the experience in the past, but you're not living from that place. And then realization is where you are living from that place day in, day out. It's yours. And what the brand experience is moving people into that space of moving from a thought of what they do, the conceptualization, into the professional beingness of who they are. That's the realization. And that's where there's power, because then you have a level of agency with what you have come to that gives you a level of freedom, autonomy, and power to radiate out your gifts into the marketplace and into your clients, and to help them in the way that they need to be helped by your gift.
That's awesome. Chris, what is that free gift that we can grab?
Well, it's really a gift to help people understand and begin to frame up what it is that their brand actually is, right? It's a simple worksheet to help you begin to unpack the key pieces of this value, differentiation, and proof perspective that can help you go deeper and deeper, right? And again, there's lots of levels to all of this, but that's what that can help you do.
Awesome. Where can we download the worksheet to help us define our brand?
Okay, so I'm going to give you the link, Morris, and for you to put it into the description of the video, and people can connect there and download that free bonus gift.
Perfect. All right. I'll put the link in the description, and also I'll put the link in a pinned comment below the video. Chris, I have one final question, because I work with a lot of coaches and consultants. And would you say that coaches and consultants need a brand?
Well, I would say this: they have a brand. The question is whether they're aware of it or not. And that, I think, is the opportunity and also the inquiry. The more that they are aware of their brand, the more that they get the benefit of showing up in the right way for their clients. That's really what it boils down to. Again, it's back to the idea of moving from an unconscious competent to a conscious competent. And it's really about helping their own evolution as a coach, as a consultant, to go to the next level, right?
I love that answer. We all have a brand. The question is, are we aware of our brand? Thank you so much, Chris, for sharing your knowledge on brand and branding here, because I see it every day online. It is a crucial piece of the content marketing puzzle. And yeah, thank you so much for being here and answering all my questions.
Great to be here, Morris. Thank you for the time.